All right, our next presenter is Matt Hiefield. In the long ago, he was a social studies teacher here. He is currently working at the district office, working on issues of the digital divide, the problems of equity when you introduce technology into a classroom, and I'll let him take it from there. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Before I get started, I go to high schools throughout the district, actually schools throughout the district, and I'd be happy to take, technology classes at any one of our high schools. But I gotta tell you that Sunset kind of has the model department for technology instruction, and Tech Talks as well is unique to the district. So although Mr. Galbraith and Ms. Gear and Ms. Arispe wouldn't brag about themselves because they're humble, hardworking people. Well, for the most part, Mr. Galbraith is. You're really lucky, and sometimes you might not feel that way if you're working on a big C++ or Java project, but it's a really good program here. So I just wanted to let you know from an outsider's perspective, who travels around the district, you're in good hands here. So education in the digital divide. I did have my clicker, but I don't have it anymore. So I want to start with some basics. And I didn't want to assume anything. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you 2 minutes, as you can see, and you're going to talk to either in twos or threes, and you are going to define what you think the digital divide is, right? And then just to up the ante, I'm going to randomly call on a couple of you, not to give your definition, but to give the definition of someone you talked with, all right? So there's no right answer. I just want to see where you're starting from, what you think the digital divide is. Put it into words and talk with at least one other person, if not two. And then if you're called on, you got to be ready to say, hey, Jane thinks the digital divide is this, or Roberto thinks the digital divide is this, and be ready to go. All right? So 2 minutes. Go ahead and start talking. All right. Note to self. 2 minutes might have been maybe a little more time than needed, but that's okay. So if you're called on, I just want you to give the definition that you heard from one of your compadres. All right? And be it that I happen to like hats. Yeah, take off that hat. No, we're going to do it differently. Since I like hats, I'm not going to tell you to speak, but tell me what you think the digital.
So we said that the digital divide was like the change in like technology, like before it was sort of like we used stuff that was more old and less digital, and now we use stuff that's like mainly based on computers. That's what we said.
Okay, so it sounds like a movement from old technology to new technology. Progress. I'm not sure where the divide comes in, but we'll get to that. All right. Since I like hats, the person next to the hat.
And speak into it. Yeah. So we said the digital divide was, since you worked in the office or district office, we were saying it could be the divide between using paper and pencil for schoolwork and online schoolwork.
Awesome, interesting. I'm gonna go back here to the man in blue. And what do you think, left or right? Well, let's get a female perspective. Oh, okay.
We said the digital divide was like the divide between some people having access to more technology
I don't know if you heard that, but some people having more access to technology, and other people not. That's getting there. That's getting closer. All right. So, just humor me. I don't know if you've ever used a program called Explee. It's kind of goofy. This is my introduction to my talk, and we'll see how it matches with some of the feedback we got from you folks as the talk goes on. We'll see if there's sound. Oh, nice. And you can, you can get into it. All right, I had a choice between kind of that, soft jazz versus there was a hard rock track, and I was like, it's 8:40, we'll go with the soft jazz. But thank you. So, trying to gear this talk to where you guys are at and what I'm seeing in the district with respect to technology and access and how it affects students in your classroom. So, the gentleman in the far back talking about people with different access to technology. So it's been about 4 years now. I think most of you, your experience at Sunset has been, being able to check out a Chromebook, taking a Chromebook home. And teachers are doing a lot more online stuff through Canvas. Some teachers flip their classrooms. I'm sure you're doing maybe some coding stuff at home based on videos you're seeing. But the thing is that not everyone has access at home, even though you have a Chromebook. That was our first misconception in the Beaverton School District. We were like, yes, everyone's, it doesn't matter if you're, come from the wealthiest household or the poorest household in the district, everyone has a computer. That's cool, right? But not everyone has access at home. And I come from a middle class background, and I'm guessing that most of you have never thought about not having access. There might be a few folks in here who don't have Wi-Fi access or broadband at home. But in Sunset, as a whole, there's probably 80 to 100 households that don't have access. And so imagine what that's like if your teachers are giving you Canvas assignments, or you're doing group projects, or there's a flipped classroom. It's pretty hard. And so this is a national video about, so these are not Sunset students, but I just want to give you a student perspective of what it might mean not to have access. Ooh, it's hard to read. The problem is that not every student is properly connected or equally equipped. Today, 5 million U.S. families with school-age children do not have broadband access at home. We sat down with kids who are most affected by this problem to talk about their real-life challenges and what it means to them.
I want to be a very, very successful businessman.
I want to go into music. I want to become like a recording artist, like a music producer.
I want to be a chef when I grow up.
Is the internet a part of your life at all?
It is my life.
When I got to high school, it really hit me like, wow, like how much I really needed it.
Almost all of our homework requires Wi-Fi. So without Wi-Fi, I access my homework, check my grades, or check my emails.
We have papers or like research stuff.
This is all I have is school, and that's really the only thing that's going for me right now. My grades and just school.
I can't do the work I need to do unless I'm connected.
You don't have the internet, you said?
No.
I don't have access to the internet.
No, I did.
My mama can't afford it. And I just don't think she's, she doesn't really worry about it. You know what I'm saying? Like she doesn't know the power of the internet.
The internet is expensive.
But my job has Wi-Fi. So where I go, where I go to work, I have a 30-minute break. Well, actually, I asked for a 30-minute break so I can do a little study.
I go to a lot of hotels because they have a lot of internet, obviously. Just a lot of businesses and that have guest Wi-Fi.
Don't take the internet for granted, because there are some kids out there who would die for the place that you're in now.
With no connectivity, these students are being left behind. And then this is through the 1 Million Project. Sprint is trying to change the lives of high school students.
You gotta do whatever you gotta do to get connected.
Oh, that's my email notifications. Darn. All right. So I want to tell you about when I first realized that this was a problem at Sunset. So as Mr. Galber said, I'm a social studies teacher, and I was teaching a class at Sunset down in A Hall, I guess 4 years ago. And I like to pride myself on using technology effectively, at least I try to. As you see in your classes, some teachers do it better than others, or for me, sometimes a project that I did with technology was really good and sometimes it wasn't. It just depended on how I set it up. But I was doing a project and students were in groups. And they were doing a research project on early civilizations, freshman year, right? And with group projects, what are a lot of students concerned about? What do you think? That's the first thing. When you get assigned a group project, what are you worried about? Yeah?
If you can communicate with your group members.
Okay, awesome. Can you communicate with your group members? Yeah. Who's in your group? Perfect.
The amount of effort each group will.
Yeah, all three of those are perfect answers. And usually, the first thing you look around your group, if the teacher picks them randomly, it's like, do I have any members that are, for lack of a better word, a weak link, right? Are they going to drag me down, kind of? And how are we going to divide this up? And so I was working with a group, and Chris, that's not his real name, but Chris was in a group, and he was a hard worker in class. And they were doing some research on early civilizations. They divided up the research, and they divided up a Google slide deck, and they were going to integrate some video and different things. And about the third day in, after class, the other group members, not Chris had left the class, the other group members came up and said, "Hey, Mr. Hiefield, we have some concerns. We don't want our grade, lowered because of Chris." And I go, "What do you mean? He seems like he's working pretty hard." He goes, "He says that he's gonna do his work every night, but he doesn't do it. He comes in the next day and just looks blank." And I say, "Well, he seems like he's working in class." And they go, "Yeah, he works some in our group, but he just doesn't get the work done." So I talked to Chris, and he said, "Well, I'll try harder." And time went on, and the group members remained frustrated. The project came to a conclusion. He didn't do very well on his slide. His slide was very basic. The rest of the project was pretty good. I assured them that isn't going to affect them personally. It took me about 2.5 months to find out that he had no connectivity at home. And because it isn't something necessarily that, you raise your hand, "Oh, my parents can't afford broadband or Wi-Fi." This isn't, how am I going to accomplish that? And so it took me about 2.5 months to figure that out. And then I figured out there were 4 other kids in my classroom with the same challenge, right? And so initially, I started looking into it, and the best answer that I had for them was, well, you can go to the library, you can go to McDonald's or Starbucks, right? And that was the best I could do at that point. And it's decent, but a lot of you do homework late at night. And a Starbucks or library's closed, Starbucks or McDonald's might be a couple miles from where you are. And if it's raining and cold, is that really realistic? And if I'm a parent, am I going to say, oh, darn that email. Am I going to tell my parent, as a parent, am I going to say, oh yeah, go, you have a project due, it's 11 p.m. You just got off your job. Yeah, go to McDonald's and a lot of Starbucks aren't even open at that time. I guess you could still sit outside of Starbucks, right? So that kind of led me down a pathway because I was really excited. I still really am excited about the Chromebooks and access to technology that we have in our district. But I realized that our technology plan was punishing our most vulnerable students in totally not fair way. It was hurting their grades, and so I started looking into the kids who didn't have access. Yeah, and their grades were suffering, right? Because teachers were assigning stuff online. So here are a few background statistics, just national, so you can get a feel for the scope of the problem. 20% of students nationally say they're impacted by the homework gap. The homework gap is just that they don't have access, they can't do homework because of lack of internet access. And 75% of school systems nationwide don't have any strategies for looking at that problem. The basic statement that 3/4 of school districts say is, hey, it's not our business. We aren't an internet provider. Students need to take care of that themselves. 70% of teachers assign work requiring access to broadband, and this is key right here, access to broadband, because when you talk to students, initially I said, well, do you have access to the internet at home? And students will say, yeah, right? But if you talk a little bit more, it might mean their father's cell phone or their mother's cell phone, right? And that isn't adequate to do. I mean, yeah, you can maybe do an email, right? You can type some text, but to do a project, I'm not sure, but I'm guessing it's probably pretty hard to do C++ or Java on a cell phone. Is that fair to say? All right. So even though a student says, yeah, I have access to the internet at home, I can get on a web browser, it isn't the same thing. And the last thing I want you to consider is that Sunset High School, I just checked the statistics, we have the highest use of Canvas in the whole district. And it continues to increase. Now, I don't know what your experience, if you like Canvas or if you don't like Canvas, if it's helpful or not helpful, but what we've seen is that if there's a critical mass of teachers that start using Canvas, and you can see all of your assignments in one place, and versus 3 or 4 years ago, some teachers had personal websites, some did Google Classroom, some did Canvas, some did Edmodo. So you had to have 5 or 6 different sites. So at Sunset, we have the highest Canvas usage in Beaverton in the district. That has implications for students who don't have adequate access at home, right? That's a problem. And here's something I want you to consider. Broadband adoption is actually plateauing. And I was just trying to research the latest. This continues to go down. What that means is that people are giving up their broadband access at home. Why do you think that is? Why do you think nationally that trend is, that people are unsubscribing from broadband? Yeah. Is what?
It's too expensive.
It's too expensive? Perfect. And to add on to that, what's your reasoning if a family has a budget, right? Monthly budget?
They rely entirely on cell.
Yeah, they're cell only because it makes total sense, right? If you are working with your family budget and you have to decide between $70 broadband, right, hookup and maybe $50 cell phone, and if it comes down to that, it would make sense to choose a cell phone, right? Because you can still do your browser, you can still do internet, but it just isn't the same. All right, so this is a trend that continues and that is affecting our students. 20% of Americans own a smartphone currently. This is a 2018 statistic this year, but do not have traditional broadband, and 15% of Americans have no broadband and no smartphone. I'm guessing that when you look around Sunset, it seems like most kids have phone access, right? Very important. But what I've noticed is I'm here twice a week doing a homework club after school. There's a number of students who have a phone but no connectivity. They come to school to get on, guest Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi, and they use their phone that way. But at home, they might not have a cell phone plan. So, and you can see that, just basic statistics. If anyone is interested, I'm giving you a copy of the slide deck if you want the statistics and the videos, but that's up to you. It does break down by, you'll see that white folks tend to have more broadband at home as opposed to blacks and Hispanics, and education is a factor. And then age, it seems like, as you can see, 30 to 39 tend to have more broadband at home. That's probably a function of both learning and just economic ability to afford it. So I've done a little bit talking at you, and I want you to, this is kind of ironic, right? It's like, oh, break out your phones, we're gonna do something on the digital divide. And it's okay if you didn't bring your phone, if you don't have a phone, but for those of you who have phones, what I want you to do is to go to this bit.ly SHS divide, and there's just a very brief survey that you can take.
Does it need permission?
All right, so let's see what you guys had, what you said. Let's just turn that. All right, so I was just curious, like, who's taking Java and C++? Looks like not a lot of ninth graders. Shout out to the 7% of ninth graders in the room. A lot of 10th, 11th graders. All right. Nice. Just to see where we are in the room. Homework per week, online homework per week. No one has 0 to 2 hours. A lot of people have over 6 hours a week. But the majority have at least 4 hours a week, right? Outside of school, what device do you end up using the most often to connect to the internet? Interesting. PC. So, this right here would be of interest to me, the smartphone. Because if someone's a cell phone only, someone's a cell phone only, then there's a chance that they can't use their Chromebook. Now I realize that some cell phones can double as a Wi-Fi hotspot, depending on your data plan and depending on the type of cell phone, right? So that's kind of interesting. 100% in this room have high-speed broadband. Right. In some ways I'd expect that, but not necessarily. If you're in a C++ class or Java, it's probably because you have an interest in technology and maybe you have a parent or a teacher that inspired you, but a lot of your learning comes at home, right? And so that makes sense. If you didn't have connectivity at home, you might not be in this class, right? That's interesting. So 18% know of at least one person who has connection issues at home. All right. Like I said, it's sunset. There might be, I don't know, 60 to 70 families who have connectivity issues. Maybe more that we don't know about. And then the last question. Electronic resources, Chromebooks, Canvas, Student View, and electronic homework have helped students to get a better education. That's really interesting. And then this is also interesting, right? Neutral or disagree. I am guessing that in your classes you've seen some pretty good use of technology from your teachers. And you've probably seen some pretty poor uses of technology, perhaps, right? I'll give you an example. As I go throughout the district, sometimes you'll walk into a classroom and everyone's quiet, right? Everyone's on their Chromebooks. And you're thinking, wow, the teacher has it dialed in. Everyone's on task, everyone's quiet. The teacher's up at their desk, in control, there's no behavioral issues. And then you're like, really? First off, if that's the whole class, there's no student engagement, it's kind of a yellow flag for me. But also, if you start looking at what students are doing, like if a student says, oh yeah, research for an hour and a half, then you think most students are going to be researching for an hour and a half? No. And so there are good uses of technology and poor uses of technology. I'm interested in that, but I will say that with confidence that the access to technology has given our students, I would at least be in the red, probably in the blue, from the things that I've seen students doing with technology. And many students who were traditionally left out of technology use. I mean, 100% of you have broadband at home, but a lot of students, this might be their first computer in their home. I'm guessing, I didn't ask it, but maybe I will if I give this presentation again. Many of you probably have 4, 5, 6, 10 devices at home, if you count all the devices in your family. For some Sunset families, their Chromebook is the only device they have at home. And what we've been noticing, it's pretty cool that other family members, because you can apply for jobs, look for healthcare, things like that. All right. Thanks for taking that. So it's kind of like, so what? So there's this digital divide. Technology is punishing some of our students, some of our poorest and most vulnerable students, right? Students living in poverty. It's actually making school worse for them, right? And that's kind of a moral imperative. I'm a social studies guy, so if I see something that doesn't seem right, you walk into Sunset stores, everyone should have an equal chance, If that's not happening, that's not good. So what are we doing? Well, first off, we're giving presentations. We're letting people know that there's an issue in our district around digital divide issues. We applied for 2.5 years ago for a grant from the Sprint Foundation, and we were one of like 2 districts in Oregon that were awarded it, and it's a hotspot grant. And so all of our high schools have hotspots for checkout if you apply for them, right? So if you don't have access at home, you can go down to the library and ask for an application from librarian or Ms. Casanelli. Like I said, 100% of you have access at home, high-speed broadband, but if you don't, there's something that can be done about it. Oops. Huh. We're keeping libraries around the district open later for students, and since we started doing that, I don't know if any of you stayed in our high school library, like on Tuesdays and Thursdays after school. There's a lot more kids than you would think stay after school. I mean, you know, for most students, the last place you want to spend is another hour and a half after school in your school library. But there's a number of kids who do that, and part of it's because of access, right? They have access to the internet, and a lot of schools have created Wi-Fi access maps for students. I've seen that a lot at the middle school level, handing out access maps to students and parents, and partnering with local businesses. So for example, let's say a dentist office has Wi-Fi. Would you be willing to, you know, have a guest Wi-Fi network open, you know, for students to use, or maybe a restaurant? So those are some of the things we're doing. We took a video of a student at Beaverton High School. Like I said, we've checked out a lot of hotspots at Sunset High School, and it's generally not something that students go, "Hey everybody, I checked out a hotspot. It's awesome." No, they check it out, they take it home, they leave it at home. You know, it's theirs for the year. And this is one student story, and how it's worked for her.
It wasn't just that we needed to make sure that every student had a device. It was after giving them these devices and trying to erase the inequity of access to resources, we understood that there was still yet another need, which is being able to connect to them once they go home.
I just assumed, unfortunately, everybody had access to the internet. It's just something that we just don't think about.
Some schools went as far as to investigate in their community the locations that students would be welcome to come and use their Wi-Fi. Some students have to park in parking lots of closed businesses or our schools in order to complete their homework. The Sprint 1 Million program is Sprint's effort at distributing 1 million devices to students who may not have access to Wi-Fi in order to complete their homework at home. The process is simply that a student who has to share internet with very many family members, or who doesn't have internet at all, who has to access the internet by use of their family's mobile phone as a hotspot, that's not high-speed internet access, which is what we want all of our students to benefit from when they're doing their homework at home. These devices are being given to families who complete our consent form to show that the parent is endorsing the distribution of this hardware to the student.
I learned about the program first through my biology teacher and then through Mr. Hanbaum, our tech support at the library. I got my hotspot probably just a couple days or a couple weeks after school started. I got my Chromebook and I found I needed Wi-Fi at home, so I went and I registered for the program. It's made a big difference for me because now I can access my classes online on my Chromebook because I don't have a phone, so I can't do it through that, and we don't have Wi-Fi at our house.
She's a very bright girl and very academically focused, and I think has high expectations for herself. And so to have that basically equalizes her opportunities to advance into a college that was appropriate for her. And I think she would have been behind some of her peers if she didn't have that access to learn outside of school.
We receive 400 devices every year, and each of those devices is active with 3 megabits of data that will accommodate a student every month for 4 years or until they graduate high school.
When I first got my hotspot, he took it out of the box, he showed me what it was, he showed me the power cord, the plug-in, like what the buttons meant and what they did. It only has 3 buttons, it's really straightforward. And after that, I could just like turn it on and then connect my Wi-Fi to the hotspot, and it was very simple.
Many students might need it, but they haven't really been exposed to that it's available to them.
It's really great. It's really simple. It's a good resource that our school offers, and I think it would be remiss if you did not utilize it.
Yeah, you can clap for her. All right. I realize I have 4 minutes left. I'll let you ask some questions in a moment. But statistically, Sunset High School has some of the wealthiest households in all of our district and some of the poorest households in all of our district. It's kind of in some ways it's kind of a U-curve a little bit. And, you know, if you think about it, is there a really good reason why I was born into this body and you were born into your situation? You know, you could easily be born into a family that struggles, or maybe, you know, a migrant family, or you don't have access. And I just encourage you, you know, when you are working with fellow students, you know, it's okay to say, hey, do you have access at home? Or, hey, can you get on your Chromebook at home? That's a pretty non-threatening question. And if they say, no, I really can't get on my Chromebook at home, you just tell them that there's help for them. Oh yeah, you can get a hotspot in the library if you apply for it. All right, so I wanted to leave just a few minutes for questions. Anything you have about the digital divide. I'll also say that research is evolving because we're slowly, people are getting more access, but what we're finding is there's a digital participation divide, meaning that some people use the internet just for really basic, you know, use, and some people are using it for much higher level use, which is what, you know, which is what we want. Question, yes?
So you say that Sprint's doing a really good job when it comes to like closing the gap between like the digital barrier, so digital divide. Do you think that any other internet service providers are doing the same thing, or is it like Sprint, like is Sprint unique?
You know, Sprint was out of the gate first, and they got a lot of good press because it's no strings attached, and they have a filter. Actually, those hotspots are double filtered. You know, I think T-Mobile and Verizon are starting some initiatives because they've seen the benefits. Good question. Yeah.
Who's paying for that?
Awesome. Sprint is.
Oh, okay.
And what does Sprint want out of? Why would Sprint do something like that? Well, it's because videos like that. You walk out going, oh, Sprint. You know, Sprint provided our district with about $4 million of service and hotspots, and it's a 5-year grant. So it's going. This is our 2nd year of the grant. So they get some good publicity. And I think T-Mobile was like, hey, they're getting good publicity, and and maybe future customers, right? If you start out with a hotspot in your home and it works well and you get access, maybe maybe when you get a job and you decide that you want to serve it a phone service or whatever, you'll go with Sprint. That's what they're hoping, I think.
So Sprint is providing internet, like these internet hotspots everywhere.
Can you say that last part again? Sprint's providing.
So Sprint's provide like it's Sprint's the carrier for like these.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. It is time to go.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Matt.